What if the person you just buried was standing in your study? It's not a ghost story. It's a story of survival. For Alistair Blackwood, the Earl of Harding, the funeral of his wife, Genevieve, was the end of his world. The rain-soaked cemetery, the heavy scent of lilies, the finality of the closed casket. It was all a nightmare. But the real nightmare was just beginning, when he returned to his cold, empty London townhouse, shattered by grief. He found her, waiting in the shadows. And she wasn't a ghost. She was a woman with a secret that could burn his entire world to the ground. The sound of dirt hitting the polished oak of the casket was a sickening, final thud. Alistair Blackwood, the 9th Earl of Harding, stood motionlessly as the London mist clung to his black wool coat. It was a miserable day in Highgate Cemetery, a day that matched the grey, hollowed-out feeling in his chest. Each shovelful of earth felt as though it were being tossed onto him, burying him alive. His wife, Genevieve, Countess of Harding, was gone. It had been so fast, a sudden, wasting sickness that had stolen the light from her eyes and the strength from her limbs. Consumption, the doctor had called it. Dr. Silas Croft, a man with a steady hand and a sombre, reassuring voice, had pronounced it a tragic, aggressive case. He had advised a closed casket. To preserve the memory of her beauty, he'd said. Alistair had numbly agreed. Now he regretted it. He hadn't seen her face one last time. He felt a hand on his shoulder. "My lord," a low voice murmured. "It is done. We should return to the hall. The chill is bone deep." Alistair turned, his gaze falling on Mr. Bartholomew Finch, the family solicitor. Finch was a tall, gaunt man, whose face seemed perpetually composed in an expression of mild concern. For 20 years he had managed the Blackwood estate, a task he performed with meticulous, unnerving efficiency. Today he looked appropriately grim, his black suit blending into the fog. "Thank you, Finch," Alistair said, his voice a rasp. "See to the carriages." Finch bowed and glided away, already issuing quiet orders to the undertakers. Alistair lingered, his eyes fixed on the growing mound of earth. Their marriage hadn't been a fairy tale. It was an arranged match, a union of Alistair's ancient title and Genevieve's new money shipping fortune. He had respected her, even admired her. She had a mind like a steel trap, a sharp wit that often cut through his own brooding silences. In the last year, however, a distance had grown, a chill that had nothing to do with the London weather. He had buried himself in the estate's ledgers, the Harding shipping line, the properties in Mayfair, while she had grown quiet, pale, and withdrawn. He had thought it was displeasure with him. Now he was consumed by a suffocating guilt. It wasn't displeasure. It was illness. An illness he had been too busy to see until it was too late. The ride back to Harding Hall, his sprawling townhouse overlooking Kensington Gardens, was silent. The clatter of the horses' hooves on the wet cobblestones was the only sound. Finch sat opposite him, holding a leather satchel, his gaze politely averted. "Dr. Croft signed the death certificate yesterday," Finch said into the silence. "Everything is in order. I have taken the liberty of drafting the necessary papers for probate. There is, of course, the matter of the will." "Not today, Finch," Alistair snapped, his voice sharper than he intended. "Of course, my lord. My apologies." Finch retreated back into his respectful silence. The townhouse felt cavernous and cold. The staff lined the hallway, their heads bowed, their black attire a mirror of his own. He wanted to tell them to go, to leave him, but the words wouldn't come. He just nodded, his throat tight, and walked past them toward his study. He needed brandy. He needed silence. He needed... He didn't know what he needed. He pushed open the heavy mahogany door to the study. The fire was out. The only light was the weak grey dusk filtering through the tall windows. He moved to the decanter on his desk, his hand shaking as he poured a liberal amount of amber liquid into a crystal tumbler. He downed it in one go. The burn was a welcome distraction. He turned to face the room, his back to the cold fireplace, and let his eyes fall closed. You always did drink too fast when you were running from something, Alistair. The glass shattered on the floor. Alistair's eyes flew open. His heart seized in his chest, a pain so sharp it drove the air from his lungs. A figure was rising from the high-backed velvet chair in the darkest corner of the room, a corner hidden by the shadow of a towering bookshelf. She was thin, horrifyingly so, and pale as moonstone. She wore a simple grey travelling dress, not a burial shroud. Her dark hair was unbound, falling weakly around her shoulders. She looked like a wraith, a fragile echo of the woman he knew. But she was not an echo. She took one hesitant step into the sliver of light. "Genevieve," he whispered. The word was a prayer and a curse. "Hello, husband," she replied, her voice a dry rustle. "I must say I'm terribly disappointed. You buried me awfully quickly." Alistair's world tilted. The brandy he'd spilled, the shattered glass at his feet, none of it registered. His mind, logical and orderly, was scrambling to find purchase on an impossible reality. "This is a trick," he breathed, backing away until he hit the solid oak desk. A cruel jest. "You are not her." "Who am I then?" she challenged, though her voice wavered. She was clearly exhausted, leaning against the chair for support. "A spirit? Come back to haunt you for all those evenings you spent locked in here with your ledgers instead of with your wife." The specific, bitter truth of that statement hit him harder than a physical blow. It was her. "Genevieve," he said again, his voice cracking. He took a step, then another, his hand outstretched. "But I saw you. Dr. Croft. The illness. The funeral. I just came from the bloody funeral." "You came from a funeral for an empty box, Alistair." She pushed herself upright, her eyes flashing with a desperate, cold fire he hadn't seen in months. "Or not entirely empty. I believe Beatrice, my maid, filled it with several heavy volumes of your family's rather dull history. A fitting substitute, I thought." He was inches from her now. He could smell the faint, familiar scent of lavender and soap, overlaid with the musty smell of dust and confinement. He lifted a trembling hand and touched her cheek. It was cold, but it was flesh. Solid. He wasn't grieving. He was furious. You let me!" he roared, his shock collapsing into a white-hot rage. "You let me stand at that grave! You let me believe you were dead! What in God's name have you done?" "What I had to do," she cried, flinching back from his anger. "What I had to do to save my own life. And as it turns out, to save yours." Alistair stared at her, baffled. "To save... from what? From consumption?" "It wasn't consumption." Genevieve's voice dropped to a terrifying whisper. "It was poison, Alistair. Slow, meticulous, administered every day in my afternoon tea. Aconite, Beatrice believes. Just enough to mimic a wasting sickness. Enough to weaken me, to silence me, to make my eventual death seem a tragic inevitability." Alistair's mind raced, trying to process the monstrous accusation. Poison. Who? One of the staff? A rival? Genevieve laughed, a dry, brittle sound that chilled him to the bone. "You're thinking too small, my dear. You're thinking of society squabbles. This is about something far older. Greed, the Harding fortune, your entire legacy." She pointed a trembling finger past him, toward the hallway. "You stood with him today. You let him comfort you. You probably rode back in the carriage with him. A sickening dread, cold and heavy, began to settle in Alistair's stomach. "What are you saying?" "I am saying," Genevieve said, her eyes boring into his, "that the man who has been systematically poisoning me for the last 4 months is the same man who holds your complete trust, the man who just helped you bury me, Mr. Bartholomew Finch." The name hung in the air, absurd and impossible. "Finch?" Alistair scoffed. "Genevieve, that's madness. Finch has served my family for 20 years. My father trusted him implicitly. He is the most loyal. He is the most practiced liar you have ever met." Genevieve shoved past him, grabbing the desk for support. "Why do you think I became so quiet? So withdrawn? I wasn't angry with you, you fool. I was frightened, and I was ill." She sank into his desk chair, her head falling into her hands. "It started when I offered to help with the shipping ledgers. You remember? You were so busy with the Tenants' Council. I thought I would be useful." Alistair did remember. It was 6 months ago. He'd been grateful. "I found discrepancies," she whispered. "Small things at first. Cargo manifests that didn't match the accounts. Payments to shell corporations. Twining's Tea Company paid twice for a shipment, but the second payment went to an account I didn't recognize. When I looked deeper, I found dozens of them. A systematic siphoning of our money, Alistair, for years." "And you? You confronted him?" Alistair asked, his own anger fading, replaced by a horrifying clarity. "I tried. I asked him, very politely, to explain the discrepancy. The next day, he brought me a special blend of tea. A restorative, he said, for my nerves. And the sickness began. The weakness, the heart palpitations, the fog in my mind. Every time I tried to bring it up to you, I was too ill to form the words. And every time I got sick, he was the one to summon Dr. Croft." "Dr. Croft," Alistair repeated, the name tasting like ash. "He was in on it. He has gambling debts all over London," Genevieve confirmed. "A few £1,000s would be all it took to buy his silence, and his signature on a death certificate." Alistair paced the room, his entire reality reconfiguring. Finch, the man who knew every secret, every holding, every weakness of the Harding estate. He wasn't just a solicitor. He was a parasite. "So you ran," Alistair said, the pieces clicking into place. "The funeral." "It was the only way," Genevieve said, looking up, her face a mask of desperate exhaustion. "I was trapped. He was killing me, and you thought I was just fading. I told my maid, Beatrice. She is the only one we can trust. She found the vial in Dr. Croft's bag 2 nights ago. He'd come to ease my suffering. It wasn't laudanum, Alistair. It was the final dose." She was weeping now, silent tears tracking through the dust on her face. Beatrice found an old herbalist book. She recognized the smell. She found a draft, a broker's brew. It simulates death, slows the heart, the breathing. It's incredibly dangerous. We had no choice. She swapped it for the poison. I took it. I trusted her to get me out." "Get you out? From the coffin?" "Before it was sealed," Genevieve shuddered. "Last night, after Dr. Croft pronounced me dead and Finch had left, satisfied. Beatrice and the stablemaster, Mr. Groves. He's been with your family since he was a boy. They moved me. They put sandbags in. They nailed it shut, and they've had me hidden in the old priest hole behind the wine cellar." She stood up, her legs shaking, and gripped the front of his coat. Her eyes were wild. "He thinks I'm gone, Alistair. He thinks he's won. He thinks you are a broken-down, grieving widower. And he is in complete control of your estate. He will be careless now. He will make a mistake. And we will be waiting." Alistair finally understood. The depth of the betrayal, the audacity of the plan. He pulled his wife, his living, breathing, resurrected wife, into his arms. She felt as fragile as a bird. "He won't win," Alistair vowed, his voice a low growl. "I'll kill him." "No." Genevieve's voice was muffled against his chest, but her tone was iron. "You won't. We won't just kill him. We will expose him. We will ruin him. We will take back everything, but to do that, you have to remain the grieving widower. And I have to remain a ghost." The study, once a sanctuary, was now a war room. The priest hole, a relic from centuries past, was no longer viable. It was damp and cold, and Genevieve was already desperately weak. "You'll stay in the East Wing," Alistair declared. "In the old nursery. No one has been in there since my mother died. The door bolts from the inside. Beatrice will be the only one with a key. She will bring you food, water, medicine." "Alistair, I can't just hide," Genevieve protested, though she was so weary she could barely stand. "You will, for now. You need to recover your strength." He looked at her, truly looked at her, and the guilt returned, sharp and acidic. Her skin was sallow, her cheekbones brutally prominent. "He did this to you. While I was worried about shipping manifests, he was murdering my wife in her own home. He was doing both, all—" Her words were cut off by a violent fit of coughing. Alistair helped her to the settee. "Beatrice," he called, his voice low but urgent. The maid, a young woman named Beatrice Pope, entered so silently it was as if she'd materialized from the wall. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed but resolute. She had been Genevieve's lady's maid since her marriage. "My lord," she curtsied, her eyes darting to Genevieve. "Take her to the nursery. Bolt the door. No one, not the head housekeeper, not the butler, no one, is to enter. Say it is being sealed for mourning. Then bring broth, bread, and warm water. And burn that dress. Find her something warm." Beatrice nodded, helping Genevieve to her feet. "Come, my lady. Let's get you safe." As they left, Genevieve looked back at Alistair. "Be careful," she whispered. "He's not just a thief. He's a murderer. He's already done it once." Alistair locked the study door and paced before the empty fireplace, his mind a whirlwind. He had to compartmentalize. The grief he had felt at the cemetery was real, but it had been for a lie. The rage was real too, but he couldn't show it. From this moment on, he was Alistair Blackwood, the broken Earl. He spent the next 3 days in a performance of a lifetime. He took his meals in his study. He spoke to no one. He wandered the halls at night, a portrait of a man unmoored by loss. The staff whispered. They pitied him. It was all a front. On the 4th day, he summoned Mr. Finch. The solicitor arrived, his face a perfect mask of concerned sympathy. "My lord, it is good to see you out of your rooms. How are you bearing up?" "Poorly, Finch. Poorly," Alistair mumbled, slumping in his chair. He had not shaved. He wore a rumpled shirt. I don't know what to do. She handled so much." "That is what I am here for, my lord," Finch said, his voice a soothing balm. "You are not to worry about a single thing. I have already begun the process of consolidating the accounts. In your delicate state, it is best if I take the full burden of the estate's management." Yes, of course." Alistair ran a hand through his dishevelled hair. "There is one thing, Finch. I must get away. This house, it is a tomb. I was thinking of travelling to the continent. Italy, perhaps, to clear my head." Alistair watched Finch's face carefully. He saw it, a flicker in the man's eyes. Not surprise, not sympathy, relief. No, it was more than that. It was triumph. An excellent idea, my lord, Finch said, clasping his hands. Truly, a change of scenery will do you a world of good. I can arrange everything. You need only pack a bag. I will handle your itinerary, your letters of credit. I will oversee the Harding line in your absence. I don't know how long I'll be, Alistair said, looking at his hands. Months. Maybe a year. Take all the time you need, Finch said, his voice practically purring. The estate will be in safe hands. I will guard it as if it were my own. I'm sure you will, Alistair thought, a cold fury rising in his throat. Very well, Alistair said, standing. Arrange it. I'll leave at the end of the week. Finch bowed, a satisfied, almost imperceptible smile on his thin lips. As you wish, my lord. When he was gone, Alistair bolted the door and sprinted up the servants' staircase to the east wing. He unlocked the nursery door. Genevieve was sitting up in the small bed, her colour slightly better. A fire crackled in the grate. Well, she asked, her voice stronger. You were right, Alistair said, his voice tight. He could barely contain his glee. He wants me gone. He wants the keys to the kingdom. Then you must give them to him, Genevieve said. I am. I'm leaving for Italy on Friday. Good. She stood, walking to a small table where Beatrice had left paper and ink. While you are away, I will not be idle. I may be a ghost, but I can still write, and I can still think. He's been siphoning money, but where is it going? I don't know. His townhouse is modest. He doesn't live extravagantly. Exactly. A man who steals this much doesn't leave it sitting in his local bank. He's moving it, Alistair. Likely out of the country. And to find it, we need to know who he corresponds with. We need his private ledgers, the ones he doesn't keep at your office. His home office, Alistair realized. On Threadneedle Street. Precisely. He'll be at Harding Hall more often now, thinking he's the new master. While he's here, poring over your desk, someone else needs to be poring over his. Alistair looked at his wife. The frail, sick woman was gone. In her place was the sharp, calculating mind he had first admired. You can't, he said. It's too dangerous. You're not strong enough. I don't have to be strong enough to fight him, Genevieve said, picking up the pen. I just have to be smart enough. You will arrange a public, very visible departure on Friday. You'll board a ship at Dover. Or at least, be seen to. And what of you? While you are at sea, I will be at his office. Finch is meticulous. He's a creature of habit. He will have a book, a ledger, something that balances his real accounts. I need to find it. You'll need help. Beatrice can't go with you. No. She must stay here, to be my eyes and ears, to report on Finch's movements in this house. You, my dear husband, will need to arrange for a grieving trip to Dover. And you'll also need to arrange for a locksmith. Alistair's departure was a masterpiece of public theatre. He made a conspicuous show of visiting his banker at Coutts Bank, informing the manager, Mr. Harrison, of his indefinite trip abroad, and signing papers that gave Mr. Finch temporary, expanded power of attorney. Mr. Harrison had looked concerned, but Alistair had played the part of the broken-hearted widower to perfection. On Friday morning, he boarded his carriage, piled high with trunks. The entire staff was assembled to see him off. He paused at the door and clasped Finch's hand. Look after everything, Finch. Everything. You have my solemn word, my lord, Finch said, his eyes gleaming with proprietary pride. Alistair rode to Dover. He was seen checking into the Lord Warden Hotel. He was seen dining alone. The next morning, he was seen boarding the steam packet to Calais. What no one saw was him disembarking, disguised in a simple tradesman's coat and cap, just before the vessel untied. He slipped onto a cargo train bound for London, arriving back in the city under the cover of darkness. He did not go to Harding Hall. He went to a small, discreet flat in Bloomsbury, rented under an assumed name. He sent a coded message to Beatrice via a street messenger. "The fox has left the coop." That night, Genevieve and Beatrice waited by the servants' entrance of Harding Hall. At precisely 10 p.m., a carriage pulled up. Finch stepped out. He had, as Genevieve predicted, moved into the master's house. He was seen by the, now dismissed for the night, staff to be heading to the study with a bottle of Alistair's best port clearly settling in. Beatrice gave the signal. "He's in the study. He won't be disturbed for hours." Genevieve, dressed in the dark, sturdy clothes of a working-class woman, her hair hidden under a cap, slipped out of the house. She moved through the back alleys of Kensington, her body thrumming with a mixture of terror and adrenaline. Her strength was returning, but she was still weak. This would take every ounce of it. She met Alistair in a dark alley near Covent Garden. He was unrecognizable. The noble Earl was gone, replaced by a man who looked like a common labourer. He was driving a simple, unmarked delivery wagon. "Are you certain?" he asked, his voice low and anxious. "He's in your study, drinking your wine. He's arrogant. He feels safe. We will never have a better chance," she said. They rode in silence to Threadneedle Street. The financial heart of London was dead at this hour. Finch's private office was on the second floor of a narrow, unassuming building. Alistair, who had procured a set of locksmith's tools, made short work of the simple lock on the alley door. They climbed the creaking stairs, a single, low-burning lantern in Alistair's hand. Finch's office was just as Alistair remembered it, obsessively neat. A single desk, a wall of ledgers, and a large black iron safe in the corner. "He won't have left the book in the open," Genevieve whispered, heading straight for the safe. "It will be locked. We don't have the combination," Alistair said. "No," Genevieve said, running her fingers over the dial. "But I have something better. I have his mind." She closed her eyes. "He's a man of obsessive habit and profound arrogance. He sees the Harding estate as his. His entire life is defined by it. The combination, it will be something related to you." She began to turn the dial. "Your birthday? No, too simple. Your father's? Perhaps." She tried it. The lock didn't budge. "What, Finch?" she whispered to the safe. "What is the day you truly felt you'd won?" Alistair watched, his heart hammering. "Genevieve!" "Wait." Her head snapped up. "The day my father signed the marriage contract. The day my fortune was officially tied to your title. The day he knew he would have access to it all." She spun the dial rapidly. "Left. Right. Left." A heavy thunk echoed in the silent room. Alistair gaped as Genevieve pulled the heavy iron door open. Inside were stacks of cash, jewellery, some of which Alistair recognized as his mother's, and a single, thick, black-bound ledger. Genevieve seized the book and opened it on the desk. Alistair brought the lantern closer. It was all there. Every illegal transfer, every shell company, dates, times, amounts. Finch hadn't just stolen from them. He had gutted the estate. He had been planning this for a decade, long before Alistair's father had died. "My God," Alistair breathed, his hand clenching into a fist. "He's stolen nearly half our fortune." "Look at this," Genevieve said, her finger tracing a line. "Weekly payments, large ones, to an account at Lloyd's Bank." "That must be Dr. Croft," Alistair spat. "No," Genevieve said, her face pale in the lantern light. "The payments to Croft are here, much smaller. These are much, much larger. And they are all coded." She flipped a page. MB, 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 over and over. He wasn't just paying off a doctor, Alistair. He was splitting the profits. "Who is MB?" Genevieve scanned the last few pages, which seemed to be letters tucked into the back. She unfolded one. Her hand began to shake so violently she dropped the paper. "Genevieve, what is it?" She didn't answer. She just pointed at the signature at the bottom of the letter. Alistair picked it up. It was a correspondence between Finch and the mysterious M.B. The letter discussed the problem of the Countess and her unfortunate curiosity. It discussed Alistair's predictable grief. It laid out a plan where, after a suitable mourning period, the grieving Earl would suffer a tragic accident while travelling alone on the continent. An accident that would leave the estate and the title to the next in line. Alistair's eyes dropped to the signature. His blood ran cold. M.B. Marcus Blackwood, his cousin. The air in the small office was suddenly suffocating. This wasn't a simple case of embezzlement. This was a conspiracy to eradicate Alistair's entire line. "Marcus," Alistair said, the name feeling like poison on his tongue. "My own blood." "He was always jealous of you," Genevieve whispered, her mind racing. "Of the title, the wealth. He was at dinner 2 weeks before I first got sick. He and Finch were in the study with you." They were, Alistair remembered, his stomach clenching. Discussing the new investments in the Americas. Marcus was the one who suggested Finch take a more hands-on role. He said I looked overburdened. He was setting the stage. Finch was the mechanism, but Marcus was the mastermind, Genevieve said, grabbing the ledger. "Finch gets the money, Marcus gets the title. And Dr. Croft was just a pawn, hired by Marcus and given to Finch to solve their problem. Me." Alistair's rage was a cold, sharp thing now. It was no longer the hot fury of a man betrayed, but the calculated precision of a man preparing for war. "They're not just murderers. They're fools," Alistair said. "They wrote it all down." "They're arrogant," Genevieve corrected. "They thought I was dead and you were a broken simpleton. This ledger was their insurance policy against each other, and it will be their undoing. We have to take it." "No," Alistair said, his mind working quickly. "Not yet. If he comes back and this is gone, he'll know. He'll bolt. So will Marcus. We have the proof, but we don't have the men. They'll flee to America, and we'll never see them, or our money, again. What do you suggest?" "We put it back," Alistair said, his voice hard. "We put it all back, exactly as we found it. We lock the safe. We leave. They cannot know we were here." Genevieve looked at him, her eyes wide. "And then?" "And then," Alistair said, gently taking the ledger from her hands and placing it back in the safe. "We don't just trap the spider. We trap the snake, too. We need them in the same room. We need them to expose themselves." He relocked the safe, mimicking Genevieve's combination. They wiped every surface they had touched. They crept down the stairs and back into the wagon, the city's fog swallowing them whole. The ride back to Kensington was silent, the weight of the conspiracy settling on them. When they parted, Alistair gripped her arm. "You are not safe. Not even in the nursery. Marcus has been in that house. He knows its passages, his family." "Where do I go?" she asked. "Nowhere. You come with me, to the flat in Bloomsbury. You'll be a ghost there, too. But you'll be a ghost he can't possibly find." For the next week, the plan was set in motion. Genevieve, hidden in the Bloomsbury flat, recovered her strength. She and Alistair, working by candlelight, pored over their memories of the ledger, recreating its contents, mapping the web of shell companies and accounts. Alistair, meanwhile, employed a different disguise. He was no longer the grieving Earl or the simple labourer. He became Mr. Matthias, a wealthy investor from Boston, complete with a passable accent and a false beard. He went to Bow Street and requested a private meeting with the Chief Magistrate, Sir Robert Catesby. He didn't present himself as the Earl of Harding. He presented himself as a representative of Harding's concerned bankers. "Sir Robert," Alistair said, his voice clipped in his feigned Bostonian accent, "we at Coutts and our American partners are deeply concerned. We believe a conspiracy is afoot to destabilize the Harding estate. We believe the Earl's life is in imminent danger from his own solicitor, Bartholomew Finch, and his cousin, Marcus Blackwood." Sir Robert was sceptical. On what grounds? The Earl left of his own free will. "On the grounds of this," Alistair said, sliding a single page across the desk. It was a perfect copy of one of the ledger entries, detailing a massive transfer of funds to an American account held by Marcus. "We have an inside source, a clerk in Finch's office who is terrified for his life. He has seen the full ledger. They plan to murder the Earl and seize the estate." The magistrate's eyes narrowed. This was not a grieving family. This was a high-stakes financial crime. "Murder? That's a bold claim, Mr. Matthias." "They've already done it once," Alistair said, his voice dropping. "We have reason to believe they murdered the Countess to gain access to her fortune and to clear the way. The clerk has evidence that her consumption was, in fact, poisoning. That was all it took. The magistrate was in. What do you need?" "A trap," Alistair said. "Finch and Blackwood believe the Earl is in Italy. I will send a letter, purportedly from the Earl's Italian physician, stating that Lord Harding has taken a turn for the worse, that he is dying. It will be delivered to Finch. And they will need to meet, to finalize their plans, to decide how to manage the news. I want your best men, Sir Robert, in plain clothes, hidden. I will lure them to one place, and when they discuss the murder of the Earl and the Countess, I want you to be there to hear it." "Where?" the magistrate asked. Alistair smiled, a cold, grim expression. Where else? The scene of their first crime, the study at Harding Hall. The forged letter was a work of art, written on expensive Italian stationery, sealed with wax, and delivered by a private courier. It landed on Bartholomew Finch's desk, Alistair's desk, with an air of grave importance. It detailed, in flawless medical Latin, the sudden and catastrophic decline of the Earl of Harding. A lung infection, a high fever. The physician held out no hope. Finch, sitting in the Earl's chair, read it, and a slow, reptilian smile spread across his face. He immediately sent a message to Marcus Blackwood. "Urgent. The Italian news has arrived. We must confer. Harding Hall. Tonight, 9. Beatrice, who had been ordered to serve Finch as his new de facto housekeeper, saw the message before the footman took it. She slipped out and sent her own message to the Bloomsbury flat. The serpents will be in the nest at 9. That evening, Harding Hall was prepared. Under the cover of darkness, 2 of Sir Robert Catesby's best Bow Street runners, dressed as footmen, entered through the servants' quarters. They were led by Beatrice to the study. They checked the heavy curtains, the alcove by the door, and the space behind Alistair's imposing desk. They were armed, and they were silent. Sir Robert himself arrived, posing as a notary, and was hidden in an adjoining records room, the door left ajar. At 8:45 p.m., Alistair and Genevieve arrived. They did not use the front door. They used the tunnel from the wine cellar, the same one Genevieve had used to escape. They emerged into the study through a hidden panel in the wall, a relic of a more dangerous time. Alistair was dressed in his own clothes, but he looked pale and drawn. Genevieve was in a simple dark dress, her hair pinned up. She was no longer a victim. She was an executioner. "Are you ready?" Alistair asked her, his hand on the panel. He took my life from me, she said, her voice steady. Tonight, I take it back. They slipped into the room and took up positions in the deepest shadows, hidden by the same towering bookshelf where Genevieve had first waited for him. The room was dark, lit only by a single, low-burning lamp on the desk. At 9 on the dot, the study doors opened. Bartholomew Finch entered, followed closely by Marcus Blackwood. Marcus, handsome and arrogant, was already pouring 2 brandies. To a successful venture, Marcus said, raising his glass. Not yet, Finch cautioned, holding the letter. He's not dead yet. But it is imminent. Excellent, Marcus took a sip. The physician's note is convincing? Completely. He's dying in some miserable Italian villa. A fitting end for a fool. Finch sat in Alistair's chair, a picture of smug ownership. It's almost too easy. Easy? Marcus scoffed. It was my plan, Finch. I was the one who saw the opportunity. I was the one who found Croft and his gambling debts. You were just a glorified bookkeeper, stealing scraps. I showed you how to steal a kingdom. And I made it possible, Finch hissed, his composure cracking. I was the one who had to deal with her. The curious countess. Day after day, putting that tincture in her tea, watching her fade. Do you know the patience that took? Yes, your talents for poisoning women are noted, Marcus said dismissively. What matters is the next step. When he's dead, the title and estate pass to me. As per our agreement, you will liquidate the American holdings, half for you, half for me. And the Harding line is finished. A clean cut, Finch agreed, nodding. From the shadows, Sir Robert Catesby tensed. He had heard it all. Conspiracy to murder, admission of a completed murder. A clean cut, Marcus repeated, swirling his brandy. It's a shame, really. Alistair was a dullard, but he was family. And Genevieve, she was a sharp one. Too sharp for her own good. Poking her nose into your ledgers, Finch. You were sloppy. It's handled, Finch said. She's ashes, and he's about to be. Is he? The voice came from the darkness by the fireplace. Both men froze. Marcus dropped his glass. Finch leaped to his feet, his face instantly draining of all colour. Alistair Blackwood stepped into the lamplight. He looked nothing like a dying man. He looked like a spectre, his face carved from ice, his eyes burning with a cold, pure hatred. Alistair, Marcus stammered, his hand flying to his hip, but he was unarmed. But Italy, the fever. The reports of my death, Alistair said, his voice a low growl, were, it seems, part of your plan, not mine. Finch was gibbering, backing away. A ghost. It cannot be. Oh, I'm not the ghost you should be worried about, Mr. Finch. And from the other side of the room, Genevieve stepped out of the shadows. Finch let out a high-pitched, strangled scream. He looked at her, then at Alistair, then back at her, his mind utterly broken by the impossibility. No. I killed you. I poisoned you. I saw the body. You saw what my maid wanted you to see, Genevieve said, her voice ringing with clarity in the stunned silence. You saw a bottle of laudanum, not a vial of aconite. You saw a closed coffin, not the woman who escaped it. You were so blinded by your own greed, you never thought to check if I was actually in it. Marcus, pragmatic to the end, recovered first. He lunged, not at Alistair, but at the fireplace poker. If you're alive, we'll just have to fix that, he snarled, raising it. I think not, Alistair said. The study doors burst open. The Bow Street runners were on Marcus in an instant, wrestling the poker from his grasp and pinning him to the floor. Finch collapsed into the chair, sobbing, It was him! It was all his idea! He made me do it." Sir Robert Catesby stepped out of the adjoining room, a small, satisfied smile on his face. "Bartholomew Finch and Marcus Blackwood," the magistrate announced, his voice booming in the study. "I arrest you both for the attempted murder of Alistair Blackwood, Earl of Harding, and the conspiracy to murder Genevieve, Countess of Harding, and from what I've heard, about a dozen other charges besides." As the runners hauled the two men to their feet, Marcus's eyes met Alistair's. His look was not one of remorse. It was one of pure, venomous spite. "You," he spat. Alistair simply stared back, unmoved. Genevieve walked over to Finch, who was trembling so hard he could barely stand. She looked down at the pathetic, broken man. "My afternoon tea, Mr. Finch," she said, her voice quiet but clear. "You'll find the gallows serve a much stronger brew." The scandal that erupted from Harding Hall was a story for the ages, yet it was one that would never be truly told. Sir Robert Catesby, with the full backing of the Crown, understood the precariousness of the situation. A public trial detailing how one of the oldest noble houses in England was nearly exterminated by its own blood, and how the Countess of Harding had to fake her own death to survive, would do more than just sell newspapers. It would shake the very foundations of the peerage. The decision was made. The trial would be held in a closed session at the Old Bailey, citing matters of sensitive national finance and the stability of noble lines. The press was fed a simpler, more digestible story. Mr. Bartholomew Finch, a trusted solicitor, had been caught in a massive embezzlement scheme, assisted by the Earl's disgraced cousin, Mr. Marcus Blackwood. It was a story of greed, not of poison and conspiracy. But for those in that sealed courtroom, the truth was laid bare in all its chilling horror. The three conspirators were tried separately. Dr. Silas Croft was first. The moment he was brought into the chamber, and his eyes fell upon Genevieve, sitting tall and very much alive beside her husband, he collapsed. His confession was a torrent of pathetic, weeping admissions. He detailed the gambling debts that had made him vulnerable, the initial inquiry from Marcus Blackwood, and the pressure from Finch. He presented himself as a weak man, not a wicked one, a tool in the hands of monsters. He was found guilty and sentenced to transportation for life, to serve as a surgeon in the penal colony of Australia. His name struck from all medical records. Bartholomew Finch was next. He was a shell of the precise, confident man he had been. He trembled in the dock, his eyes darting between the judges and Marcus, who was held in an anteroom. When he spoke, it was a high-pitched, desperate plea. "He made me! It was Marcus!" Finch shrieked, pointing at the door as if Blackwood were already there. I only ever handled the money, the idea of the poison, the aconite. That was him. He found Croft. He saw the Countess as an obstacle to his ambition. I just wanted the money. I never wanted to kill." His plea fell on deaf ears. The ledger, his own meticulous record of their crimes, damned him more thoroughly than any testimony. He was found guilty and sentenced to hang. 2 weeks later, on a cold, grey morning at Newgate Prison, he met his end. There was no family to claim the body. He was buried in an unmarked grave, his name and legacy erased. Finally, there was Marcus Blackwood. He entered the courtroom not in shackles, but escorted by 2 guards, his head held high. He wore the suit of a gentleman, and his gaze was pure, unadulterated ice. He did not look at Finch's empty chair or the weeping doctor. He looked at Alistair, and he looked at Genevieve. When asked for his plea, he was silent. When presented with the ledger, he merely smiled. "You have no proof I wrote any of that," he said, his voice smooth. "You only have the word of a desperate, climbing solicitor." "And the testimony of Dr. Croft," Sir Robert stated. a known gambler, and a confessed conspirator. His word is worthless, Marcus countered. And you have the testimony of your intended victims, the judge said, motioning to Alistair and Genevieve. Marcus's smile widened. Alistair, my dear cousin. He was so consumed by grief he ran off to Italy. Who is to say his mind is sound? And the Countess, a woman who faked her own death, a woman who lied to the entire world, to her staff, to her own husband, a woman given to dramatics. Perhaps she poisoned herself for attention. Perhaps this is all her elaborate fiction. A cold silence fell. Genevieve felt Alistair's hand clench into a fist at his side. Before he could speak, she leaned forward. You are very clever, Marcus, she said, her voice clear and carrying to every corner of the room. But you made one mistake. You believed your own arrogance. You believed you were the smartest man in the room. You assumed my husband was a fool and that I was a fragile doll. You underestimated us, and that is why you are in that box, and we are here. Marcus's smile faltered, replaced by a flash of pure hatred. He said nothing more. He was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, high treason against his own house, and fraud. Given his station, he was spared the public humiliation of the gallows. He was taken to the Tower of London. At dawn, facing a wall of cold stone, he was executed by firing squad. His last words, whispered to the wind, were not of remorse, but of chilling, final spite. You'll never be free of me, Alistair. You'll always be the man who let his wife die. The resurrection of the Countess of Harding was a 9-day wonder for London society. The official story, the one given to the staff and the ton, was a miracle of medicine. Lady Harding, so ill with consumption, had been secretly transported to a private sanatorium in the Swiss Alps. Her funeral had been a ruse to protect her from the stress of society's expectations while she underwent a radical, experimental treatment. Her recovery and her return alongside the Earl was a testament to their devotion. Their first public appearance, 6 months later, at a ball given by the Duchess of Sutherland, was a trial by fire. The whispers followed them like a breeze. My dear, is that her? She looks thinner, but the colour in her cheeks, remarkable. And the Earl, he hasn't left her side all night. It used to be he'd be in the card room for hours. One bold dowager, Lady Ashford, cornered Genevieve by the champagne fountain. Countess, she said, tapping her fan, you look, well, one might almost say, resurrected. Genevieve met her gaze with a serene smile. Indeed, Lady Ashford, the Alpine air is truly miraculous. It has a way of clearing out all the old, lingering illnesses. One returns with a much stronger constitution. Alistair came to her side, sliding his hand into hers. He didn't glower at the old woman. He simply smiled, a new, easy smile that held a glint of steel. My wife, he said, has never been stronger. Now, if you'll excuse us. He led her to the dance floor, and as they moved under the chandeliers, the whispers died. They were no longer the cold, distant Blackwoods. They were a unit, a fortress. The financial recovery took a year. They recovered nearly 70% of the liquid assets Finch and Marcus had stolen. But the true change was in the Harding shipping line. Alistair, once bored by the ledgers, now attacked them with a new vigour. And he was not alone. The main office in the City of London now had 2 desks. Mr. Davies, the new chief solicitor, quickly learned that to get an answer from the Earl, one first presented the facts to the Countess. It was Genevieve who, poring over maps and manifests, identified a new, faster trade route to Boston. It was Alistair who, with a ruthless new efficiency, cut out the corrupt middlemen and secured the contracts. Their work was no longer a chore. It was a partnership. One evening, exactly 1 year to the day of the funeral, they were in the study. The fire was roaring, chasing away the chill of a new winter. Alistair stood by the window, watching the first snow fall on Kensington Gardens. "A year ago today," he said, his voice quiet, "I stood in Highgate Cemetery and watched them bury an empty box, and I felt a grief so profound I thought it would hollow me out." Genevieve came up behind him, resting her chin on his shoulder. "And now?" "Now," he said, turning to face her. "I still feel the phantom of it. I still hear Marcus's last words sometimes." "He was wrong," she said fiercely, touching his face. "He said you let me die. But the truth is, you were the only one who helped me live. We were two strangers, Alistair, living in the same house, bound by a contract. Finch. All of it. It was a crucible." "It was," he agreed, his gaze softening. "They thought they were destroying us, but they were melting us down. All the pretense, all the cold duty, they burned it all away. When I saw you in this room, standing in those shadows, I wasn't just seeing a woman I thought was dead. I was seeing you, for the first time, your strength, your fire. And I saw you," she whispered. "Not the brooding Earl in his study, but the man who would disguise himself as a labourer, who would break into an office, who would set a trap for his own blood to protect me, to protect us." He pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her, as if she were the most precious thing in the world. And to him, she was. The cold, arranged marriage was a distant memory. The terror of the past year had forged something new, something unbreakable in its place. "They tried to steal the Harding legacy," Alistair murmured, kissing her forehead. "They tried to take the money, the houses, the title. They didn't realize until it was too late." "What?" she asked. "That the only inheritance that ever truly mattered," he said, "was you. The shadows of the past are long, but they cannot extinguish the light of the truth." Alistair and Genevieve faced the ultimate betrayal, from friends, from family, and walked through the fire to emerge stronger. Their story isn't just a romance, it's a chilling reminder that the greatest threats often wear the most familiar faces, and that true partnership is forged in crisis. They thought they had buried the Countess, but they only buried her fear, allowing the survivor to rise. If you were on the edge of your seat watching Genevieve turn the tables on her own murderers, please show your support by hitting that like button. What part of their plan shocked you the most? Let me know in the comments below. And if you love stories of drama, revenge, and unbreakable bonds, make sure you subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell. We have so many more real-life tales and gripping dramas coming your way. Thank you for listening.